Shalom Aleichem and welcome back everyone as we have the privilege to once again to prepare for Shabbat Kodesh, this week being Shabbat Parashat Tazria, being Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, as well as being Shabbat Parashat HaChodesh, the fourth of the four special Parshiot that we read between the month of Adar and Nisan. They should come to us in good health and good spirits, Be'ezat Hashem. We should be, like we know, Nisan is going to be on Shabbat, Be'ezat Hashem, and we know that in Nisan we were redeemed. Be'ezat Hashem, in Nisan we will be redeemed again, Be'ezat Hashem. We should be all Zochet to bring the Korban Pesach this year. Amen. Okay, so let's take a look on a couple of lessons. We're going to focus primarily on Parshat Tazria. On Shabbat we'll talk about Parashat HaChodesh. So, Parashat Tazria. Last week we ended off Parashat Shemini, and Parashat Shemini ended off talking about the kashrut of the animals, which ones were okay, which ones were not. And we talked about the issue that if a person ate non-kosher or ate from money that was not kosher, how it's mitam to mitalev, it blocks the person's heart and is a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In this week's Parashat Tazria, and as well as in the following Parashat that we'll read, Mitzorah, we deal primarily with the dinim of a mitzorah, a person who begets tzarat, a person who gets leprosy. It's a physical manifestation of a spiritual disease, and a person gets this tzarat. What's the connection between Parashat Shemini, which ends off with the kashrut, that a person, what they can eat, what they can't eat, and Parashat Tazria, mitzorah, that really deals with the mitzorah itself? And so Rav Yisrael Salanter, Chasadik B'Bracha, explained, he said there's an irony. There's a lot of people who, Baruch Hashem, when it comes to kashrut, are very careful. Highest standards, no questions. When it comes to that's what comes into their mouths. Very, very careful. But what comes out of their mouths, they're not so careful. As the famous story is told, there was a group of Jews who went into a hotel. They sat down to have a meal. And they began to ask the hostess so much questions about which hashgaha, which meat, where they got it, where they shecht it, when they grit it, what greens, what this, what that, all the questions. Finally, they ordered some food, and while she was going to get the food for them, she hears them talking lashon hara about people. And the woman, she said to them, it's so interesting that there's some people who are so careful about what goes into their mouths, but I absolutely don't care about what comes out of their mouths. We know the Gemara tells us that one of the main reasons a person would have gotten tzara'at in the times in the Mishkan and the times of the Beit HaMikdash, the tzara'at came, one of the main reasons was because of lashon hara. Someone who spoke evilly, someone who spoke, and even if it means it's true, even if it's not true, it's an even bigger issue, but it's true, but it's evil, and it's not good talk, that is very harmful for the person, so much so that it comes as sarat, as a physical manifestation of his spiritual disease. There was once a boy that wanted to get into yeshiva, and the Rebbe said, we don't know, we should listen to him, we shouldn't listen to him, should we take him in, should not taking him. So the Rebbe said, let's listen how this boy speaks. He said, when someone doesn't feel well, he goes to the doctor. One of the first things the doctor says to you is to stick out your tongue. Right? From the tongue, he's able to check person feeling well, not feeling well. I once went to a doctor who said, it was one of these homeopathic doctors who said that he studied the tongue for 10 years. You give him a tongue, he'll tell you everything about you. But that's what he does. The person sticks out his tongue. The tongue is clean. We know the person's clean. He says the same thing with the person. Lashon hara, if a person speaks evilly, we know there's a bigger spiritual disease in this person than anything else. So the way a person speaks is most important. When the Vilna Gaon went on his final trip, an ill-fated journey to Eretz Yisrael, he wrote a farewell letter to his family. And now we know the Vilna Gaon was one of the greatest luminaries of Torah of his time. You would expect that his letter to his family would be, learn Torah, don't waste time. But yet, he writes in his letter to his family, the most important factor to earn Olam Haba is to be careful with what comes out of a person's mouth. This is more than all the Torah that a person learns and the mitzvot that he performs. Because the mouth is Kodesh Kodashim. It's the holiest of holies. In fact, the Minhag HaGaon adds that wherever a person goes, there's an angel that follows him, recording every word. Right? They used to imagine it as being writing it down. Today, you can imagine it as being there's a spotlight camera right on you. Right? You have your own. You're your star of your own show. You don't even know it. We don't even know we're a star of our own movie show, and everything's being recorded. The Zohar says one cannot imagine the terrible suffering that a person will be forced to endure for every evil word spoken. There are many, many books, Baruch Hashem, that we have. Amen. There are many, many books that we have today that Baruch Hashem teach us about Lashon Hara. But Rav Pam wants to get into the cause of Lashon Hara. What causes a person to speak Lashon Hara? Why would someone want to say something evil about somebody else? And he says the real fault is not the mouth. The fault of Lashon Hara is actually the eyes. The eyes. And the tzarat is known as a nega, right? As an affliction. The word nega also can be, if you scramble the letters, if you put the ayin in the beginning, it becomes oneg. It all has to do with the ayin. If you put the ayin at the end, with your bad eye you look, it becomes a nega. Everything is bad. If a person looks with a good eye, right? Like Pirkei Avot says, the best thing you have is a good eye. You look at everything well. It's how you focus yourself. Rav Pam brings down a pasuk in Mishlei. The pasuk in Mishlei tells us from Shlomo HaMelech, love covers all offenses. If you really love somebody, then whatever they do, you don't mind. You don't bother. It's okay. How many times parents, someone would say, your child did this, your child did that. Right away the parent says, it's my kid, he's okay. It comes up with excuses. Not all parents are like this, but today, Baruch Hashem, many parents are. There's always a reason why you would overlook. The kid might be acting the worst the day before, but the next day is his birthday. Okay, let's get him a cake. Anyway. Why? Because love covers all offenses. When we have to protect our mouth from speaking Lashon Hara, it's not just speaking about people. Rav Pam says also, Onat Devarim. It's also about not speaking harshly to other people. Not to make people feel bad through our words. Including, and this is very hard, including not making jokes about people that can hurt them. And usually any joke about a person usually would hurt them. Whether they say so or not, that's the way it is. Even if a person doesn't have intention to hurt them with his words, that in itself, he doesn't pay attention to what he's speaking, can really, really hurt them. Rav Pam would share over a story that he once overheard a woman berating her child, and she said, "You're a bad boy." And as soon as she said that you're a bad boy, the boy burst into tears, and he couldn't calm him down. Rav Pam later explained, he said, the reason the child was so upset was because the mother said he was a bad boy, he was a bad person. She didn't look at him anymore as being good. What the mother should have said was, what you did was a bad thing, and a good boy like you shouldn't do it. In this week's parasha, when it says you have to isolate the person who has tzarat, it says that over there, v'hiskir hakohen et hanega shivat yamim. You have to isolate the nega. You have to isolate the affliction. It doesn't say you have to isolate the person. It says you have to isolate the infliction. You have to isolate the problem, not the person. A person has to look that most people are actually good people. That's the way it is in the world. Most people are good people. Almost all Jews are very good people. And so when something bad happens, we have to think of it as a bad thing and not a bad person. That is a very special way to look at life, to differentiate the sin from the sinner. Right? You had this in the Gemara with Bruria, right? He was davening that the sinners should die. She said, no, don't daven for the sinners to die. Rather daven that they should stop sinning. And isolate the affliction. Rav Pam would continue and say, but sometimes people don't even pay attention to how they're affecting people with their words. And he brought a little story over here. He says, imagine a little girl, Malcolm, wanted to surprise her mother for her birthday. So for many weeks, whatever money her parents gave her, she saved those few dollars. And she went and she bought a little tchotchke, a little knick-knack, a little something from the store to give to her mother for her birthday. And when it was her mother's birthday, she goes into the kitchen and she brings to her mother a little gift wrapped up. The mother takes it, opens it up, and says to Malka, where did this come from? And she says, Mommy, I bought you a present. You're going to love it. The mother opens it and says, Malka, why'd you buy a tchotchke? Why'd you waste your money on this? This is junk. Right? Made in China. What happens to Malka? All that she wanted to do was something nice. And now, her mother kind of, emotionally killed her. Now, the mother obviously didn't want to do this. She didn't want to hurt her daughter like this. But when you don't pay attention, it leads to such ideas, leads to such problems. Rav Pam says that this sad scenario doesn't only happen with the mother to child, but he says it happens especially with spouses. It comes to a birthday anniversary, and we all like to get a surprise for our spouse. Unfortunately, a lot of times our surprises are not met with the happy face that we would want. Today, Baruch Hashem, a lot of people come with the gift receipt. You can take it back. Now some people even stop getting gift receipts. Now they just give a gift card. Go get what you want to get. But there's something about getting an actual present. And what happens is the person gets it and he gets a sour face. Or he shows he doesn't like it. Or he or she says something, why'd you get this? I didn't need it. And all this leads to a person feeling very bad. Shlomo Melech teaches us in Mishlei that life and death, or rather death and life, are in the power of the tongue. The tongue can cause someone to literally die, or it can bring someone back to life. I remember working with once, I was working as an English teacher, where the principal said that I can build you or I can destroy you. And that's the truth. Every person can do that with his mouth. Rav Pam says, even if a spouse, a child, or anybody tried to do something good for you and it didn't work out, it's so important to still thank them for it, even if you don't like it so much. He says, you know why? You want to give credit for good intentions. Someone had good machshava, you want to give credit. Why? He says, because what do you think is going to happen when we come to Shemayim? You're going to come to Shemayim, and they're going to take out all your mitzvot, and they're going to say, sorry, these don't count. Why not? They weren't done correctly. He says, but I wanted to do them correctly. He says, if you give people credit for when they try to do something correctly, and you do it, and then you do it, and then you give them credit, then in Shemayim they'll give you credit also for someone else's, for your good credit, your good intentions. And so, Rabotai, from Rav Pam, we come out with an amazing idea from this week's parasha, is that we have to really give credit for good intentions. And when we do have to berate or isolate or tell someone they're doing something wrong, we really have to take the issue at hand and not the person at hand. Just because we're talking about Lashon Hara and Sarat, I just want to end off with one on this topic, it's kind of related, on one last story from Rab Zilberstein. Shlita Rab Zilberstein says it's a pretty famous story, that there are, again, people not paying attention to the words that they're saying and how could it cause someone pain. There were two seminary girls that they were traveling on a bus in Eretz Yisrael, and their friend just got engaged the night before, and they were sitting and talking about their friend, and they said, oh, I can't believe that guy is going to get married to her. Oh, if he only knew that she's like this, she's like that, she's a slob, whatever which they knew about her from being in the same seminary and dorm room. And as they were talking, the woman sitting right in front of them turned around and said, I want to say thank you so much for sharing this information. They said, what do you mean? She said, I am the mother of the boy who just got engaged to your friend. And now that I know this, I'm going to go home and tell him to break the shidduch. We don't want such a girl. So right away they're like, no. We didn't mean it. We were just, girls just talk. It's not. She says, no, what you said earlier sounded much more convincing. Now I don't believe that. You're just making excuses. And the girls were begging and saying, Chas v'shalom, we didn't mean it, And eventually, really, woman was not the mother. But she said, I could have been. Or I could have been the aunt. I could have been someone related. And I could have gone and taken that. Again, people, we have to be very careful with our words. Once our words come out, it's very hard to take them back. Very, 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 very hard. Even if you don't mean them. And therefore, this week's Parashat tells us a very important idea. You have to be very careful. Just as you're careful for the food that goes into our mouths, Baruch Hashem, we have to be just as careful, if not more, of what comes out. Let's move on to another lesson from this week's Parasha. The Sefer HaChinuch brings an amazing idea, amazing lesson, amazing fact that we learn from people who get tzarat. The Sefer HaChinuch says, you know what's tzarat? A mitzvah, someone becoming tzarat, getting on his body, getting on his clothing, getting on his house. What it teaches us? It teaches us hashgacha pratit. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running this world and he's having individual supervision for every single person. This person spoke Lashon Hara and Hashem comes and gives him tzarat so he should make tshuva. Because there are a lot of people in the world that say, yeah, Hashem created the world and then he left it. He made nature and he left it. Other people say Hashem's here, he's watching, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care if I turn the lights on and shower. He's going to care about every little act I do. When we have tzarat coming on people, it was clear to the world that the Hashgacha Pratit existed. Hashgacha Pratit is the belief that everything that happens in this world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching, supervising, and making sure happens to that specific person for a specific reason. That's why this whole idea of Midah Keneged Midah and all these things apply, because a person can realize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to him. When the Mitzorah becomes a Mitzorah, he realizes that Hashem is speaking to him. He realized he did one of the 7 sins that you could get tzarat for. And he's able to make the tshuva for that. Here in the publication, It's a Haim, he shares what I believe is an amazing story. I think I heard it once, but I read it this week and I said I have to share the story. There was a Jew in Eretz Yisrael who just had a new baby boy. Everyone was happy. And a few days after the baby was born, the man realized that something is not right with his son. So right away, they quickly rushed the baby to the doctors. They took him straight to the hospital. They went to the hospital and the doctors examined the baby. And they said the baby has a very little chance to live. He's going to die. The only way for this baby to live is they have to go to America. There's a specialist there. He may have some sort of surgery that be able to save this child, but it costs tens of thousands of dollars. Of course, these people weren't going to just let their child die. And so they borrowed money. They spoke to people. They borrowed. They did the rabbanim. They spoke to everyone. And they ended up in America. They come to Manhattan. And these couple don't speak English. It's very hard. But they finally arrive at the hospital. And the doctor comes, examines the baby. And the doctor says to them that I'm looking at this baby and I see the surgery is much more than I thought it would be. And as such, I'm going to have to charge you another $100,000. This is a very risky surgery. And if you want me to do it, you need another $100,000. But he said, you have to let me know in about 2-3 hours if you have that money. Because I have a 2-week vacation schedule and I'm leaving tonight. So if you want it to happen, you have to let me right away and write it out. You have to tell me, you have to bring the money up front. That's the way the story goes. So right away, this man doesn't know what to do. He reaches out to his friends in New York. He says, is there any rich man in the area that can help? So they said there's actually a rich man who lives a few blocks away from the hospital. Big Gever, big Baal Tzedakah. Go to him. I don't know how much he's going to give you, but go to him. Maybe he can help. So Yosef, he's now trying to navigate Manhattan traffic all by himself. And he ends up in front of the building finally. And he rings the doorbell. He gets in. And the butler comes, opens the door. And he says, I'm a younger man from Eretz Yisrael. Younger man is a young man who learns in Kollel. So he says, I'm a younger man from Eretz Yisrael. And the butler said, wait here. Then the butler took him and brought him into the study of this rich man. And he sees him, he starts talking in Hebrew. He says to him, I'm a younger man from Eretz Yisrael. My baby's here in the hospital, I need the money. And the man says to him, listen, I don't have time for stories. I have to leave. Here's an envelope, I gotta go. He's like, okay. The man leaves. He opens up the envelope in the study and he sees exactly $100,000 in there. He calls his wife. He tells his wife, tell the doctor I have the money. I'm coming right now. He runs to the hospital. He calls up the money and he gives it. And the surgery is done. Baruch Hashem, the child gets healed and they come back to Eretz Yisrael. And they make a Sudah Hoda'ah in their shul. They make a Sudah Hoda'ah. And the father gets up and he starts to say the whole story, how it happened. And all of a sudden, this Gevir gave him $100,000. Didn't even want him to talk. Said, I can't hear you. He gave him the money anyway. And while Yosef was saying the story, one of the people in the crowd was crying. And when he finished the story, he walked over and said, is everything okay? He says, can I please say a few words? He says, yes, please. And he said, you guys heard now half the story. Let me tell you the other half. My father-in-law, he says, this man says, lives up north. And he was trying to raise money for a long time to build a shul. And finally, after many years, he got in touch with a rich man in Manhattan. And he was going to have a meeting with him in his home. And my father-in-law, he was in Manhattan that day, and he got stuck in traffic. And he came extremely late to the rich man's home. And when he arrived there, the butler told him the rich man wasn't there. And my father-in-law continued to wait. Finally, late at night, the rich man got back. And my father-in-law was waiting there, and he told him, I'm here for Eretz Yisrael. I'm here to pick up the money. And the Gevir, this rich man, was shocked. He said, what? You already were here. Someone from Eretz Yisrael came, and I gave him the money. He said, my father couldn't imagine what happened. He didn't understand. Where did the money go? He came back to Eretz Yisrael. He went to Yitzhak Zilberstein. He asked Zilberstein. He said, the money that went missing, and it went to somebody else. Who really belongs that money to? And Rav Zilberstein took that to Rav Chaim Kanevsky, his father, his brother-in-law. And he took it to Rav Chaim Kanevsky, and he asked him. And Rav Chaim Kanevsky said that the money belongs to the person who got it. And we never knew who got it. Until today, we find out it was you. And you want to know what's even more interesting? He says, my father-in-law's last name is Jungerman. And so when you said you're a younger man, using the Yiddish expression for a young man sitting in Kollel, it got confused. But what do we see? That it's really not confusion. It's really hashgacha pratit. HaKadosh Baruch Hu already prepared the $100,000 for this man to have so his child can have the surgery and live. Who are we to say anything else? What we have to do is believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Today we don't have tzaraat anymore. But still today, everything that happens in life, it's a direct communication from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The question though is, how do we interpret it? How do we understand it? How do we apply it? So this really leads us to our next lesson from this week's parasha, our third and final lesson for this week. From the Medrash Tanhuma. The Medrash Tanhuma tells a story about a Kohen. He was an expert in looking at negaim, looking at these tzaraat, looking at these lesions. And he lost all his money. And he decided he needed to travel to go get and raise some money for his family. And he told his wife, listen, people always come here to know what tzaraat, yes or no. So I'm going to teach you how to look at a mitzorah, to look at the negaim and to know. So the first thing you need to know, if you see a person's hair dried up, you know for sure he had a nega, he had tzaraat. Since Hashem created each strand of hair with its own source from which it nurtures and grows. If the source is dried up, the hair is dried up. His wife says to him, his Eshet Hayil says to him, Habi, you understand what you just said, Tzaddik? He said, listen to what you said. You said Hashem creates a source of nourishment for each hair. You don't think Hashem providing a source of parnasah for you, that you think you have to go somewhere else to get it? Hashem will also provide a source of parnasah for you. A story is told about a man who lived in Bnei Brak. He was a young koilo man. He already had many children, and he was living in a small bedroom apartment. Already in this room, in the 2-bedroom apartment, there was no space. Wherever they had space was a mattress or a trunk of clothing, or a mattress on top of the trunk of clothing. And Baruch Hashem, his wife was blessed with a 9th child. And at this point, the wife and the husband said, we need to find another apartment, another place to live. So they spoke to each other and they said, you know what, we're going to go to our father and ask our father for another apartment. Who is their father? So the husband took his tehillim and he traveled to the Kotel. He was at the Kotel and he was davening, he was pouring his heart out, and he was davening for mercy and begging that Hashem should answer him. Please, please Hashem, help my growing family. Give us a place where we can live and to serve you. And just as he was almost finished davening, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He looks back, and there was a pair of kind eyes looking at him. And the man said to him, why do you cry? Maybe I can help. He said, no, I don't need your help. I need Hashem's help. He said, okay, so tell me what you need help with. He said, listen, I have 9 children, and we need a bigger apartment. He says, where do you live? He says, I live in Bnei Brak. He says, okay, come with me. He drives him. He takes him to the real estate agency. And this older man walks inside the agency and says, do you have any big apartments in Bnei Brak? They said, yeah, we have 1, 2. He takes a look at it. And he says, is this one you like? You think this one will work for your family? Show him the pictures. He says, yes, of course. He says, no problem. He takes out a check and he writes a check for the full amount of the apartments. Bought. And gives it to the real estate agency. The man smiles. He says, how can I thank you? I don't even know your name. He says, you don't need to know my name. You asked for Hashem's help. Hashem sent me to help you. That's it. There's nothing else to know. The man was very excited. He thanked HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He came home. His family was excited. Baruch Hashem, they had a place to live. And their secret benefactor helped them. And as soon as he got back to Bnei Brak, the story got out. And now his whole kollel decided they're also going to go to the Kotel. And they're going to daven for another apartment. And they went and they davened and they were there from morning to night. And no one tapped on their shoulder. And no one gave him an apartment. The Rosh Kollel later commented and he said, see, the first man who went, he went to the Kotel to daven to Hashem. And then this man came to his rescue. But these later people, they went to the Kotel to find the man. And so Hashem did help them the way they thought they needed to be helped. So, what do we see from here? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Hashgacha Pratit. He's watching, he's providing, he's giving source to every little piece in the world. Our job is not to focus on the man, but to focus on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like we said many times, that's why Shema, you have to close your eyes when you say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, because you open your eyes. So there's many reasons, but one of the reasons is you open your eyes and you see the world and you think man-made. The house was made by man. This was made in China. That was made in China. I remember once my father was giving a shir about how everything's from Hashem, and he said, who made this? Who made this? And there was one guy in the shir kept saying, China, China, China. Became his klitschko, I don't know. China. Everything was China. But that's what happens when you open your eyes. It looks like that. The person has to realize that he needs to really open his eyes. Open his spiritual eye. In order that, you have to close your physical eye. And then you'll see HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running the world, Hashgacha Pratit, providing stores for everywhere. And Be'ezrat Hashem, we can take the lessons that we learned, that you have to be very careful what comes in, comes out of our mouths. Careful to pay attention, even though if we don't mean it, it's still problematic. Spouses, children, everything you have to be very careful of. The lesson that Hashem runs the world b'hashgacha pratit, and that Hashem provides a source and parnasah for everyone. And with this, I'd love to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Parshat Tazria, Rosh Chodesh Tov, and Shabbat Parshat HaChodesh. And Be'ezrat Hashem, like we said, in Nisan we were redeemed, and Be'ezrat Hashem, in Nisan again we shall be redeemed. Amen. Shabbat Shalom and Kulam.